And so to get that call that night was one of the greatest things that could ever happen. And I want to encourage all of you to not give up on people. I am Michael Sove. I live on the East Coast in Maryland, and our friend here is Mary Thompson, and I'll introduce her more in a moment. But we have an amazing story that started about 8 months ago. It's really hard to even think of all the aspects that came into this story, because God was working in my life, God was working in her life, and then he brought us together in the strangest way. So on August 29th, 2019, I was sitting in my office at church, and another pastor came in and said, "Hey, a lady just called us from the apartments across the road and wants me to come over. Would you go with me?" So I said, "Absolutely." So we go over and knock on the apartment door, and Mary came out. And well, actually, what I want Mary to do is tell you why she even called in the first place. We didn't know each other previous to this moment. Mary, why don't you tell why you called us?
I felt like I was under spiritual attack. I cannot even explain it. There was nothing that could be said in my house unless it was an argument. Everybody, it was just out of control. It was so much oppression. You could feel it as soon as you walked through the door. You know, it interrupted your sleep. It interrupted daily activity, and there were children in the house. It reeked with oppression and depression every single day. And I tried everything that I could, but pray.
So she calls, we go over, we meet her face to face. And when she came out of the apartment, she was like trembling. You could tell that something was really going on. So I asked her one of the questions I ask a lot of times when I'm out prayer walking, after I engage a person. I said, "If God could do a miracle in your life, what would it be, Mary?" And so, Mary, what did you say?
To save my family, and I want to live right and get back on my feet, be able to function, be able to be financially okay and stop everything that's going on in my home.
And so I asked her, "Well, who lives in the home?" You know, because if we're going to walk into a stranger's home, we don't know anything about anything. So we just said, "Who lives in this home?" And what did you say, Mary?
My wife, my daughter and her kids. They're my family.
So immediately, unbeknownst to her, I'm facing a stronghold in my life. I didn't know how to handle people who were in a gay lifestyle. You know, I was a pastor, but I just didn't know how to handle it. I knew I needed to, but I didn't know how. You know, and before, I guess if I was honest about my attitude, I had this self-righteous attitude. I know what God says in his word, and this is what it is. I just didn't know how to extend grace, to extend love. But God had been working in my heart all these years. And so we decided to go in and let's see what happens. So we walk into this house, this apartment, and a whole bunch of people were on the deck smoking. And so Mary goes over and opens the sliding door and says, "I want all of you to come in here right now." She was tough. And she said, "Sit on the floor." And so it was Mary plus 6 other people. It was her daughter, her daughter's fiance, it was her wife, it was her wife's friend, and then the 3 kids were over on the side. And I'll never, ever forget what Mary said at that point. This was our introduction. She said, "We're either going to get God in this place, or all of you are going to get out." this is Pastor Bruce and this is Pastor Mike, and I brought them here to tell us how we can know God. Well, so here I am. I've been a Christian 36 years. I'm really, really gifted in evangelism. And so my modus operandi most of the time was proclamation evangelism. And I use 3 circles. I'm really good with it and everything. So since she was asking us, tell us how we can know God, I had never done a Discover Bible study yet. Okay, so I was starting to get introduced to it. I was aware of it, but I only knew how to do proclamation evangelism. So I pulled out a blank sheet of paper. I had a captive audience, and I shared 3 circles. And then I went around, I started with the guy, Jerry, and I asked him where he was in the diagram. And they all put, well, very interesting that day, they all put themselves in brokenness. We're broken. And so, of course, I'm not going to share that without saying, well, is there anyone that wants to step out of that brokenness? I could show you how. So I went around, and none of them were ready until we got to her daughter, who was sitting on the ground weeping. And she said, I can't do this anymore. I want Jesus in my life. And so I led Lisa to Christ that day. All the other 6 gathered around. It was really cool to watch it. They all knew they were broken. They all knew they were needy, but they all gathered around Lisa, who was weeping in the middle of the floor, saying she needed a life change. So we go through that. And then all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit said, okay, you've been learning about Discover Bible studies. Why don't you just try it right now? Why don't you just go out there and ask them if they'd be open for you to come back next week and start to look at some passages, and that we could discover what God has for us. And I'll never forget the answer. They said, yes, we want that. Would you please come back? Total opposite of what I thought. I thought, man, when you start going out there trying to see if people were interested in reading the Bible, they're going to say, no, of course, no. But here, these people were interested. So we came back the next week, and we began Creation to Christ. And so then when we get to Genesis 2, that's where the rubber meets the road, because we're talking about God made male and female. God made husband and wife. A man shall leave his father and mother and be united to his wife. Okay, so we go through the study, and I told Mary, I said, Mary, this is where I'm at. I just want you to know I love you unconditionally, but this is where I'm at. And Mary, what did you tell me that day?
I said, it's nobody's business who I sleep with. I honestly felt in my heart that, there were 10 commandments and none of them said, thou shalt not be gay. That was my ignorance. So that's how I felt. That was my response. So
I told her, I said, Mary, I love you guys unconditionally. I'm in this for the long haul, okay? But just know, here's where I'm at. It's something I believe you need to face. And if you ever come across the street, you're totally welcome if you want to. If you come across the street, just understand that this is the stance, this is what we teach, this is where we are. And I can be gracious to you, but I can't guarantee you that everyone's going to be gracious to you. So that's how that...
But I can say he went above and beyond gracious to me. Above and beyond gracious to me. He made me feel like a daughter. He never, ever for a moment let me forget that he was there. So, go ahead.
So, we continue in the Discover Bible study process. About 3 weeks later, Jerry, her daughter's fiance, gave his life to Christ. I think we were on the passage about sin and man falling and all that stuff. And Jerry said, I've been thinking about what you told me that first day, and I'm ready. And then we came to the point where Jerry and Mary and her daughter Lisa came to me and said, we'd like to be baptized. So I gulped and I thought, okay, Lisa and Jerry, I have no problem baptizing them, but what do I do with a woman who hasn't I mean, she's given her life to Christ from what I can tell, but she hasn't, you know. And then I thought, well, when I got baptized, I wasn't squeaky clean either. I'm going to let God work in her life. And so I went to the lead pastor. I said, Mary and Lisa and Jerry want to be baptized. He says, absolutely, absolutely. So that was I think that was a really, really big step, because I knew God was going to have the final say. And I knew her heart. I could tell her desire for Christ. And while I was finishing the Discover Bible study, I got all the way through Creation to Christ. Then Lisa's children, Jalen and Angel, at the last lesson said, we want Jesus. What do we have to do? So now her daughter's saved, the fiance of her daughter is saved. Jalen and Angel get saved. So God is just continuing to move. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary now, because she had gone down to Florida to help a friend, and God was working on Mary in Florida. Now, I just finished a 21-day fast, and so I called Mary, and I was telling her what God was doing as a result of this fast, and she says, you know what, I think I need to do that too. So Mary, take the story from there and bring it up to how God had you start reading Leviticus.
So, I mean, I was happy. The kids moved out. My daughter had her own place, and I went to Florida with my wife to celebrate with my friend. And unfortunately, she broke her leg, and I ended up staying there, and my wife flew back. I was staying there maybe, I want to say close to 2 months. I ended up staying, but my wife was home. I can tell you, I started to pray then and stay in contact with my pastor. I started to notice a lot of things, like when everybody left the house, the problem was still home. When I would call home, you can feel the derogative, the negativity, I believe that God moved me out of there so I can actually see through my own windows what the situation was, and nobody was coaxing me. Nobody was talking about, it's somebody that I love. This is my wife. It's somebody I pledged my life to. And it just got worse from there. So I started praying and praying and praying and praying and praying and contacting everybody I knew that could pray. And then the dread took over, because then I knew, I started thinking, not that it was wrong, but I was getting a divorce. And I didn't want that. In my mind, like I said, I want to make it work, but it's the dread of knowing that maybe the person that you love is not in love with you. And now God is in there too, So I'm fighting this, and it's just getting worse. The more that I pray, the more distance we are, the worse it gets. So fast forward, I come home. During this time, it's such a trying time, because with my friend, I am disabled. It pushed me to the max to be able to help her. My father had a stroke, financially behind, and on top of that, I'm going through a divorce. I think it was the worst time in my life. I was hit from every angle you can imagine. I wanted to die. And I've never been so low in my life. And if I didn't have my pastor, if I didn't have those bases, if I didn't know those things, I would have not listened. I would have listened, But I cried out. I got it out of my system, and I just said, "What do you want from me? Just speak to me, God. What is it that I need to know?" This is after the fact now. I have been left. You took everything. You smudged my name. You did everything you could do to me. Now I'm away from my dad, and I'm quarantined, and there's nobody here. I can die by myself. And I lost it. I lost it. I cried out to God like I've never cried out before. And I just grabbed the Bible. What do you want to say to me, please? And it opened up to Leviticus 20, verse 20, 25. And I started to read. And I started to get sick because I knew that it was definitely God talking to me. And I couldn't unsee it. Could not see it. So I did the most difficult thing I could to release myself from that pain, was to give up that living sacrifice of my sexuality, because I realized then that I had given someone more, or even the pleasure of my flesh more, I gave it more grace, more idol, more attention, more of me than I wouldn't even say good morning to God. I wouldn't even have a conversation with Jesus. Because if I give that up, please, will you take away this pain? Will you just take away, I will never do this again. As long as I live, I will never sleep with another woman again, because now I see it, I know it's the law, and I know what the consequences are.
Mary, tell them how many years you were trapped in that lifestyle.
I've been a lesbian for 26 years. 26 years. I have a daughter, she's 28 years old. The last time I was in a heterosexual relationship, she was 2 years old. So this is, like I said, the hardest thing in the world to give up. But I'm telling you, there's nothing in this world that I can take, drug, drink, or anybody that could touch me like I feel right now. There's nothing you can give me. You can't make this up. You just can't. And if it helps somebody, I'm here. If it even inspire you, it's a true story.
So Mary, tell them who the first person you called.
After God, you.
Yes.
You.
Why did you call me?
Because I honored you. It was an honor to be able to tell the man that helped deliver me. He saved my life. He cared enough about me, it didn't matter the color of my skin, who I slept with, how much money I made, where I lived. He went against his own grain for me. And I loved him for that. Him and his wife. So.
Now, Mary doesn't know this, but God is awesome. I'm crying. I told her she'd get me crying again.
Good to me.
But I journal all my prayers, and so I could go back to the very first time that I met Mary, and I looked at the first prayer that I prayed over her, even knowing her situation, and here's what I said. God, I pray that Mary Thompson can become a disciple worth following. Help her to be an influencer with her life. That was my first prayer. So now she's on the phone telling me that she totally surrendered to Christ. There's no greater joy. And then I could look at all these other prayers I prayed day after day after day. God, I don't know how to show her the truth about your standards for marriage. You're going to have to show her, God. I can't. And it just on and on and on. And so to get that call that night was one of the greatest things that could ever happen. And I want to encourage all of you to not give up on people. I want to encourage all of you to let God do his work. He's going to use us, and it's going to be a joyous thing. But God can do anything. And Mary is a testimony of that. I told Mary that she's going to be my greatest church planter. Mark my words. Mark my words. This is just the beginning of this story. So don't give up on people. What are you saying, Mary?
It's not easy. The transformation is not easy. It is a bloody, knockdown, drag out fight, but it is worth it once you go through it. Well, I don't say go through it anymore. You grow through it. You don't lose anything, you learn. Just, if I can offer anybody any optimism, I'm a living witness to that, because I felt like the lowest of the low. If I could have stopped my own heart, I would have. But when God touched me, it's nothing like it. Yeah,
because God is amazing. And he can take two strangers that have prejudices and all that, and he can work in all of us and make something really beautiful. So Mary calls me father. I consider her daughter, and that's our story.